Well, we asked the government to join us live tonight, but no one was available. However, joining me now is social housing campaigner Melvin Akins and Joe Beswick, who's head of housing and land at the New Economics Foundation. Welcome to you both. Melvin, you grew up in the Grenfell community on the estate. The government made a lot of promises after the Grenfell fire. Does this Green Paper live up to those promises?
I don't think it does. There are two elements to consider: how we deal with social housing stock that we've got and what we need to do about the social housing stock we require. It's clear it completely omits the second element, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But if we talk about the first element, looking after the social housing stock that we've got, the few things that are in this Green Paper are statements of the blindingly obvious, things that residents have been asking and campaigning for years.
But you're now getting some of those things, aren't you?
Well, to my mind, they just seem to be proposals about proposals, so we haven't actually got anything yet.
But there are very tangible suggestions here. So being able to buy 1% of the value of your property every year, I mean, that's quite a big change. It's going to upset quite a few landlords. The transparency that is, suggested, perhaps one should say guaranteed in this, putting landlords on a kind of, scale of performance. I mean, these are all very practical measures, are they not, Joe?
The reality is about this social housing Green Paper is that it was long anticipated and much promoted by the government. Sajid Javid described it, I think, as the most important document of its kind in a generation. And so there was a lot of anticipation about the document and what it was going to what it was going to suggest. It was almost expected that there might be a change in direction of housing policy. And that's, I think, the key message.
So they overread the rhetoric?
They massively overread the rhetoric, because we've got really very little. The main driver of the housing crisis in this country is the fact that we have 1 million fewer council homes than we did 40 years ago. And there's nothing in this social housing Green Paper to really address that problem.
But if you look at the practical, the nitty-gritty of these measures as they've been suggested, do you think that will make a difference to how tenants live their lives in social housing, how they are regarded, the stigma of social housing?
We have to start somewhere. So I think the fact that they've at least got it on paper shows that they're acknowledging it. But it's one thing acknowledging it, and it's a completely other scenario to actually do something about it. And as yet, they haven't done anything about it.
Joe, what would you do about it? How would you change things?
Well, we need to start from where we are. And where we are is we are building the fewest new social homes since records began in history in this country. And so what the government needs to do is commit to the rhetoric which it has been offering, particularly after Grenfell, that we need a renaissance of social house building. We need a social house building on a scale that we haven't seen for a number of generations.
But that is going to be very costly, isn't it?
And the way that we're going to see that is for the government to do it themselves. The only time we've really solved the housing crisis is when the government has done it. The question of cost is an important one. What social housing requires is upfront capital investment. But study after study has shown that in the long run, because of the reduction in housing benefit bill and the fact that it generates an income stream for the government through rent, it actually costs zero or makes money for the government.
It's easy to say that we need that extra housing, and we clearly do, but it's not so easy to come up with a solution of how to cost it, how to fund it.
Well, the costs are, they need to be worked out, but the facts remain as this. We are building roughly 10% of the social housing that we require, about 6,000 a year. They estimate that we need 10 times that amount. But not only that, we've got tenants. We're talking about tenants, but we're completely omitting the fact that there are a large number of leaseholders in social housing as well. And that group of people are, not spoken about or focused on either.
I mean, one of the proposals, as I mentioned earlier, is this thing that you can, buy 1% of the value of the property every year, which doesn't sound a lot, but if you're on a long-term lease, it adds up, and there'll be some landlords who won't be happy about it. How many people do you think will take advantage of that?
I think it's a promising, proposal, actually. One of the difficult things about being in a rented accommodation, whether it's private or social, is being able to save for a deposit and get on the housing ladder. Now, if you are able to do that by buying a small percentage of the property that you're in, and it allows you to gain a deposit to actually get onto the property ladder and free up the social housing property that you're in for a future family.
Which it sort of says it will do,
yeah,
right? That's the theory.
Absolutely. And one of the other things about social housing is what we have is a lack of rotation of stock. So a lot of people are in, but they never have a way to get out.
Joe, do you think this sets the stage for something bigger? I mean, at least it's a beginning heading in the right direction.
I mean, The revised right to buy, which they've introduced, is an interesting policy. It's one of their flagship policy, but I think it says a lot about how the housing system in this country has gone wrong over the last 40 years. That previously council tenants the policy was that they could buy their house outright, and now they can buy percentiles at a time. It shows how expensive homes are, and therefore shows the need for social housing. One of the really simplest things that they could do, which really staggers me that it wasn't in this housing green paper, is allow councils to borrow to build council homes again. Councils across the country are able to borrow to buy all sorts of different things. Councils have been buying supermarkets more recently, but they're not able to borrow to build council homes.
Got to leave it there. Joe Beswick, Melvin Akins, thanks very much indeed.